I stood at my twin baby's funeral, my legs shaking so badly I thought they might give out, when my mother-in-law, Beatrix, leaned over their tiny white caskets and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, God took them because he knew what kind of mother they had. The words struck me like physical blows, each one knocking the air from my lungs. My name is Cordelia Mitchell, but everyone calls me Cora, and 3 days earlier, I had found my 3-month-old twins, Finnegan and Beckham, dead in their cribs. The funeral parlor in Columbus, Ohio, was filled with relatives who had come to mourn my boys. But instead of comfort, I heard whispers ripple through the pews after Beatrix's cruel declaration. She's right, someone murmured behind me. Some women just can't handle multiple children, another voice added. My husband, Garrison, stood right beside me, his pharmaceutical sales suit perfectly pressed, his face carved from stone, saying absolutely nothing to defend me. Not a single word. I wanted to scream that Beatrix had tormented me from the very first day Garrison brought me home 8 years ago. I wanted to tell everyone how she had criticized every bottle I prepared, every diaper I changed, every lullaby I sang to my precious boys. But grief had stolen my voice, trapping it somewhere beneath the unbearable weight crushing my chest. My parents, Jeremiah and Winifred, had just arrived from Seattle, but they sat 3 rows back, too far away to hear what was happening, too far to save me from drowning in this nightmare. Then I felt a small hand slip into mine. My 7-year-old daughter, Deline, whom we call Delelphi, stood beside me in her black dress, the same one she had worn to her spring piano recital just 2 months earlier, when her baby brothers were still alive, still breathing, still filling our house with their precious cries. She squeezed my fingers 3 times, our secret code for I love you. We had created it during Beatrix's visits, when things became too much to bear. Beatrix's voice grew louder as she addressed the room, her gray hair perfectly coiffed despite the supposed grief of losing her grandsons. Sometimes God shows mercy in mysterious ways, she announced, her voice coated in the false sweetness she had perfected over the years, like poison wrapped in honey. These innocent angels were spared from suffering. The Lord knows what's best, and he knew what kind of household they were in. My sister-in-law, Nain, nodded vigorously from her seat, dabbing at dry eyes with a handkerchief. Uncle Clifford, Beatrix's brother, actually said, Amen, as if this were some twisted church service instead of my baby's funeral. These were people who had eaten at my table, held my boys, and told me what a wonderful mother I was just weeks earlier. Now they stood in judgment, acting as jury to Beatrix's prosecutor, while my husband remained a silent witness to my public execution. Pastor John cleared his throat at the podium, clearly uncomfortable with the direction the service had taken. But even he seemed unsure how to stop Beatrix once she had claimed the spotlight. She had donated thousands to the church over the years, buying herself unquestioned authority, and now she was using my son's funeral as her personal stage to destroy me. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what happened next. Delelphi released my hand and stepped forward with a kind of determination I had never seen on her young face. Her Mary Janes clicked against the funeral parlor floor, each step echoing in the sudden silence as every head turned to watch this small girl walk toward the podium. She reached up and tugged on Pastor John's black robe. When he bent down to listen, she spoke in a clear, steady voice that carried through the entire room. Pastor John, should I tell everyone what Grandma put in the baby bottles? The funeral parlor went ice cold. Beatrix's face shifted from false grief to pure terror in a single heartbeat. Garrison finally looked up from his hands, and in that moment, I realized my 7-year-old daughter was about to reveal a truth that would shatter everything I thought I knew about how my babies had died. 3 months earlier, before I stood in that funeral parlor, I believed I was living my second chance at happiness. Our home in suburban Columbus was the kind of place I had dreamed about as a little girl. 2 stories, white shutters, and a backyard with the swing set Garrison had assembled himself when Delelphi turned 5. The nursery I painted soft blue with clouds on the ceiling held 2 cribs, 2 rocking chairs, and more love than I thought my heart could contain. Finnegan and Beckham had arrived after 5 years of trying, 5 years of negative pregnancy tests that felt like personal failures, 5 years of Beatrix reminding me that a real woman would have given her son more children by now. The morning the twins were born, I remember Garrison holding them for the first time, tears streaming down his face. "They're perfect, Cora," he whispered. And for once, just that once, I thought maybe we could be the family I had always wanted. Even Beatrix had seemed softer that day, though she still found a way to mention that her other son's wife had delivered naturally without any pain medication, while I had given up and gotten an epidural. Our daily routine had settled into a kind of controlled chaos by the time the boys were 3 months old. I worked from home as a graphic designer, my laptop permanently open on the kitchen table between bottle feedings and diaper changes. My clients were patient, understanding when a video call included baby sounds in the background. I had found my rhythm. I nursed Finnegan while Beckham slept, then switched to designing logos during their synchronized naps. I helped DeLelfie with homework while wearing one twin in a carrier and rocking the other with my foot. It was exhausting and beautiful. Everything motherhood was supposed to be. But Tuesdays and Thursdays were different. Those were the days. Garrison traveled for his pharmaceutical sales job, visiting doctors' offices across Ohio and Kentucky, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. Those were also the days Beatrix insisted on helping with the twins. "You can't possibly manage 3 children alone," she had announced when the boys were just 2 weeks old, standing in my living room like she owned it. "I raised 3 boys myself. I know what I'm doing. You need to accept help, Cordelia." Garrison had agreed immediately. "Mom's right, honey. You look exhausted. Let her help while I'm gone." The first time she came over, I found her rearranging my entire kitchen. "Bottles should be in this cabinet. Formula goes here. You had everything mixed up." When I tried to explain my system, she gave me that look. The one that said I was too young, too stupid, too inadequate to know anything about raising children. "I've been a mother longer than you've been alive, dear," she said, as if that ended every discussion. DeLelfie noticed everything. She was only 7, but she carried herself like someone much older, probably because she had learned to read the tension in our house the way other kids read picture books. She started making excuses to stay home from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, mysterious stomach aches that vanished the moment Beatrix's Lexus pulled out of our driveway. "Mommy, why does Grandma make you sad?" she asked one Thursday night as I tucked her into bed, the twins finally asleep after a particularly fussy day. "Grandma doesn't make me sad, sweetheart," I lied, smoothing her dark hair. "Sometimes grown-ups just have different ideas about things." She frowned, thinking. "You do burp the babies, right? I watched you and the nurse at the hospital. You do it exactly the same way the nurse showed you." My daughter saw everything, remembered everything. I should have listened more closely to what she was trying to tell me. The weeks passed in a blur of feedings and criticism. Beatrix arrived at exactly 8 o'clock every Tuesday and Thursday, letting herself in with the key Garrison had given her, despite my protests. "The formula you're using isn't the best one," she'd announce. "These babies cry too much. You're not putting them on a proper schedule. Why is this house such a mess?" In my day, mothers didn't complain about being tired. She hovered while I nursed, commenting on how long it took, suggesting formula would be more efficient. She reorganized the twins' dresser, refolded their blankets, checked the temperature of their bottles, even after I had already tested them myself. Nothing I did met her standards. Nothing ever had. The night before my babies died, Garrison called from his hotel in Kentucky. "How's Mom doing with her help?" he asked. Not how was I doing, not how were the boys. "Your mother's fine," I answered, because what else could I say? That his mother was slowly eroding my confidence, my sanity, my sense of myself as a mother? He had already chosen his side years ago, and it wasn't mine. If only I'd known that would be our last normal conversation. If only I had paid attention to the growing dread I felt every time Beatrix walked through my door. If only I had listened to my daughter's watchful silence and knowing eyes. Thursday morning arrived wrapped in an unnatural quiet. My body clock, trained by 3 months of 5 a.m. cries, woke me at 4:47. I lay there, waiting for Finnegan's hungry whimper or Beckham's distinctive grunt that meant a diaper change was needed. Nothing came. The baby monitor on my nightstand showed 2 still forms in their cribs. They must be having their first good sleep, I thought, as I pulled on my robe and padded down the hall to check on them. The nursery door was slightly open, exactly how I had left it. Morning light filtered through the cloud-patterned curtains I had sewn while pregnant. I went to Finnegan's crib first, and my world stopped. His tiny chest wasn't moving. His perfect lips were blue. I grabbed him, his body cold and stiff against my chest, and screamed. The sound that tore out of me wasn't human. It was the sound of a soul splitting in 2. Garrison burst into the room, took one look, and ran to Beckham's crib. "No, no, no, no," he chanted, lifting our other son and attempting infant CPR while I called 911, my fingers barely able to hit the right numbers. The operator's calm voice asked questions I couldn't process. Were they breathing? When had I last seen them alive? How old were the babies? The paramedics arrived in 6 minutes that felt like 6 years. They worked on my boys with professional efficiency, but I saw the look they exchanged. That look that said they were doing this for us, not because there was hope. They pronounced both boys dead at 5:23 a.m. Sudden infant death syndrome, they said at first. 2 babies at once was rare, but not impossible. Sometimes with twins, when one stops breathing, the other follows. Beatrix arrived within the hour, even though no one had called her. I had a feeling something was wrong, she announced, pushing past me to reach Garrison, who sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. She wrapped her arms around her son while I stood there, like a stranger in my own home. "My poor boy," she cooed. "My poor, poor boy." Not our poor boys, not my poor grandsons. Her poor boy, as if he were the only one who had lost anything. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of arrangements I was never allowed to make. Beatrix took control of everything, bringing her sister Nayen and her brother Clifford as reinforcement. They descended on our house like carrion birds, picking through decisions that should have belonged to Garrison and me alone. "White caskets are too expensive for infants," Beatrix declared at the funeral home. "The wooden ones are more practical." Practical? I found my voice for a brief moment. "We're burying my babies, not buying furniture." "Our babies," Garrison corrected quietly, the only thing he had said in hours. "Of course," Beatrix interjected smoothly. "But Cordelia, dear, you're not thinking clearly. Let those of us with clearer heads make these decisions." The extended family began arriving Tuesday evening, and each one was given Beatrix's version of events before they ever saw me. I watched from my bedroom window as she met them in the driveway, talking animatedly, gesturing toward the house, shaking her head with practiced sadness. By the time they came inside, their eyes held suspicion instead of sympathy. "How does this happen to both babies?" Garrison's cousin Renee asked, not quite meeting my eyes. "Were they sick?" "They were perfect," I said. "Healthy. Their 2-month checkup was perfect." "Sometimes mothers miss signs," Beatrix interrupted. "Cordelia's been overwhelmed. I tried to help, but she insisted on doing everything herself." The lie was so bold, it stole my breath. She had been there twice a week, controlling everything, criticizing everything. I tried to speak, but my voice died in my throat when I saw Garrison nodding along with his mother's narrative. My parents arrived Wednesday night after driving straight through from Seattle. My father, Jeremiah, took one look at the dynamics in the house and pulled me aside. "What's happening here, Cora? Why is that woman treating you like a suspect instead of a grieving mother?" "She's always hated me, Dad," I whispered. "But now she has an audience." My mother, Winifred, was less restrained. She confronted Beatrix in the kitchen. "My daughter just lost her children. How dare you make implications about her?" "I'm not implying anything," Beatrix replied with practiced innocence. "But 2 healthy babies don't just die. The authorities will investigate, as they should." Delelphi hadn't left my side except to sleep. She watched everything with those sharp, observant eyes, especially her grandmother. On Wednesday night, I found her sitting on her bedroom floor with her journal, writing furiously. "What are you writing, baby?" She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Things I want to remember about Finn and Beck, and other stuff." "What other stuff?" She closed the journal carefully. "Just things I notice. Like how Grandma Beatrix pretends to cry, but her eyes are never wet, and how Daddy won't look at you, and how Uncle Clifford and Aunt Nain believe everything Grandma says even though they weren't here." I pulled her into my arms. This child who saw truth while adults chose blindness. "Sometimes people see what they want to see, sweetheart. But that's not right," she whispered into my shoulder. "Not when Finn and Beck are dead. The truth matters more now, doesn't it?" The funeral service began at 10 o'clock sharp on a gray Wednesday morning that matched the color of my heart. I sat in the front row of the Morrison Funeral Home, my black dress hanging loose on a body that had forgotten how to eat. Garrison sat beside me, but the 6 inches between us felt like 6 miles. He hadn't touched me once since we found the boys. Not a hand held, not an arm around my shoulders, not even an accidental brush of fingers. His grief had built a wall between us, brick by brick, mortared with his mother's poisonous words. Pastor John stood at the podium, his kind face creased with genuine sorrow. He had baptized the twins just 6 weeks earlier, sprinkling holy water on their perfect heads as they squirmed in their white christening gowns. Now those same gowns dressed them for burial, and I couldn't reconcile the memory with the reality. "We gather today to celebrate the brief but precious lives of Finnegan and Beckham Mitchell," Pastor John began. Beatrix was already standing. "Pastor, may I say something first?" She didn't wait for permission. She walked to the podium with the confidence of someone who had never been denied anything. Pastor John stepped aside, clearly uncomfortable, but too polite to refuse a grieving grandmother. Beatrix adjusted the microphone with theatrical precision. She wore a black suit that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage, a pearl necklace catching the light from the stained glass windows. She dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, though from my angle I could see they were perfectly dry. "My grandsons were angels," she began, her voice adopting the tone she reserved for public performances. 3 months of life, barely enough time to know this world, but perhaps that was God's mercy. The congregation murmured sympathetically. I felt Delelphi tense beside me, her small hand gripping mine. "You see," Beatrix continued, "sometimes the Lord, in his infinite wisdom, removes innocent souls from situations that would damage their purity. He sees all, he knows all. He knows which households are filled with love and which are filled with chaos. He knows which mothers are equipped for the sacred duty of raising children and which are overwhelmed by their own inadequacies." My mother gasped audibly from the 3rd row. My father started to stand, but I turned and shook my head slightly. Making a scene would only feed Beatrix's narrative that I came from an unstable family. "I tried to help," Beatrix went on, her voice growing stronger as she found her rhythm. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, I went to that house to provide the structure and wisdom that only experience can bring. But some people are too proud to accept guidance, too stubborn to admit they're drowning. And now my son, my poor Garrison, has lost his boys because someone couldn't admit she needed more help than she was willing to accept." "That's enough, Mother," Garrison finally said. But his voice was weak, barely audible. "No, son, it needs to be said." Beatrix turned her gaze directly on me. "God took those babies because he knew what kind of mother they had. A mother who insisted she could handle 3 children while working. A mother who refused proper help. A mother too proud to admit she was failing." I felt the room tilt. Sometimes God's mercy looks like tragedy to those who don't understand his ways. Nain stood from her seat. "Amen, sister. The Lord works in mysterious ways." Clifford nodded solemnly. "Those babies are better off in heaven than in a chaotic household." My father was on his feet now, my mother grabbing his arm, trying to pull him back, but it was like watching an avalanche gain speed. Other relatives, people who barely knew me, were nodding along, murmuring their agreement. "She was always tired," someone whispered loudly. "The house was never clean when I visited," another voice added. "Postpartum depression, probably," someone else speculated. Each word I wanted to stand and scream that Beatrix had tormented me for years, that she had undermined every moment of my motherhood, that she had made me doubt every instinct I had ever trusted. But my voice was buried beneath the crushing weight of grief and injustice. Pastor John cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the service, but Beatrix wasn't finished. "I just pray," she said, folding her hands, "that if God blesses them with more children, lessons will have been learned, that pride won't overcome common sense again, that my son won't have to suffer another loss because someone couldn't admit her limitations." That was when I felt Del Elfie slip away from my side. She stood up with a calm dignity that didn't belong to a 7-year-old, smoothing her black dress with careful precision. Her Mary Janes clicked against the funeral home floor as she walked, not toward the bathroom, not toward the exit, but straight toward Pastor John. Every head turned to watch this small girl weave through the sea of flowers surrounding the 2 white caskets. She reached the podium and tugged firmly on Pastor John's robe. Even Beatrix stopped mid-sentence, whatever fresh poison she had been preparing, dying on her lips. Pastor John knelt to Del Elfie's level, his face gentle. And in that stillness, my daughter's clear voice rang out like a bell. The room froze. Beatrix's face drained of all color, her makeup stark against skin that had gone paper white. Her hand flew to her pearl necklace, clutching it so tightly I thought it might snap. Garrison shot to his feet beside me, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Pastor John stayed kneeling, his training keeping his voice calm. "What do you mean, sweetheart? What did you see?" Del Elfie stood straight, chin lifted. "Last Tuesday, I was thirsty after breakfast. I went to the kitchen to get my juice box. Grandma was standing at the counter with Finn and Beck's bottles. Daddy's work bag was open, the black one he takes on trips. She was crushing pills from his sample medicines and mixing the powder into their milk." "You lying little brat," Beatrix screamed, lunging forward. Pastor John stood instantly, placing himself between her and my daughter. "Let the child speak." "She saw me watching," Del Elfie continued, unshaken. "Grandma said the medicine would help them sleep better. She said good grandmothers make sure babies don't cry too much because crying means the mother isn't doing her job right. She said Mommy needed to learn that babies should be quiet." Garrison rushed to the podium. "Deli baby, you must be confused. Grandma would never hurt your brothers." "I'm not confused, Daddy." She reached into her small black purse, the one I'd let her carry so she could feel grown up, and pulled out my old iPhone. I took pictures. She swiped the screen, then held it up. Even from where I stood, moving toward her on shaking legs, I could see the image clearly. Beatrix at my kitchen counter, a prescription bottle in one hand, a pill crusher in the other, 2 baby bottles lined up in front of her. "There's more," Del Elfie said, swiping again. "This one shows the medicine bottle label. It says sedative sample and has Daddy's company name. This one shows her pouring the powder into Finn's bottle. This one shows her shaking Beck's bottle." My legs buckled. I would have collapsed if my father hadn't caught me. My mother was already on the phone with 911, her voice sharp and steady. Beatrix's composure shattered. "They were just mild sedatives. Babies need sleep. She never let them cry it out properly. I was helping." "You drugged my babies," I screamed, the sound tearing out of me raw and animal. "You put sedatives in my 3-month-old baby's bottles." "They needed to sleep through the night," Beatrix shrieked back. "You were making them weak with all that coddling." Garrison turned on her, his voice erupting. "Mother, what did you do? What did you do?" "I was fixing your mistake," she screamed. "You married beneath yourself. I was solving the problem." Pastor John was already calling the police. Phones were raised all around the room. Nain collapsed into sobs. Clifford stood frozen, his mouth hanging open. Del Elfie wasn't finished. "I wrote it all down, too," she said, pulling out her small journal. "Every time Grandma came over. What she said, what she did with the bottles, how the babies wouldn't wake up after they drank them." She opened the journal and read. "Tuesday, May 15th. Grandma put medicine in Finn and Beck's bottles again. She used more than last time. She said they needed to learn to sleep like dead babies. The room erupted. Sirens wailed outside as Beatrix tried to run, only to be blocked by my father and other men. The police burst through the doors moments later, and the woman who had stood at the podium preaching righteousness was led away in handcuffs beside my son's caskets. The police station became our second home for the next 72 hours. Detective Patricia Morse, whom I recognized from the initial investigation, worked closely with a pediatric forensic specialist to fast-track the toxicology tests on my babies. When the results came back, the medical examiner's face told me everything before she even spoke. There were lethal levels of sedatives in both boys' systems. The medication was identified as a powerful prescription sleep aid from Garrison's pharmaceutical sample collection, never meant for anyone under 18, let alone 3-month-old infants. The dose Beatrix had given them was enough to suppress their respiratory systems until they simply stopped breathing. The investigation peeled back layer after layer of horror. Beatrix's computer search history showed months of preparation. How much sedative for infants' sleep? Babies who won't wake up. Making babies sleep through night medicine. And the most chilling search of all, infant overdose. How much? She hadn't acted impulsively. She had planned it, increasing the doses gradually. The Tuesday before the boys died, she had given them 5 times the amount she'd started with. Garrison's world collapsed in on itself. The day after the funeral, he sat on the living room floor holding the twins' baptism photo, sobbing in a way I had never seen a grown man cry. "I gave her access to my samples," he kept repeating. "I gave her the key to our house. I told you to let her help. I killed our sons." "Your mother killed our sons," I said quietly, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort him. For 8 years, he had chosen her over me. He had stood silent while she dismantled me piece by piece. His complicity had created the space where she felt entitled to commit the unthinkable. The trial moved quickly. Beatrix's lawyer tried to claim diminished capacity, insisting she had only meant to help the babies sleep, not kill them. That defense didn't survive my daughter's testimony. DeLelfi sat in the witness chair, feet dangling, voice steady, as she read from her journal. Every date, every incident, every cruel word Beatrix had said about me, every time she had seen her grandmother with the bottles. May 8th, DeLelfi read. Grandma said Mommy was too stupid to know babies need discipline. She said when Daddy divorces Mommy, she will raise us. May 13th. Grandma put medicine in the bottles and told me it was vitamins, but I know what vitamins look like, and those weren't vitamins. May 20th. Grandma said the babies would sleep so hard that nothing would wake them. She laughed when she said it. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. Life without parole. Beatrix screamed as the verdict was read, shrieking that we had ruined her life, that she had only been trying to help, that I was the real murderer for being such a bad mother she had been forced to intervene. Court officers dragged her away, still screaming, still blaming everyone but herself. Garrison filed for divorce 2 weeks later, not because he blamed me, but because he couldn't look at me without seeing his failure. Every time I see you, I remember that I stood silent while she tortured you, he told me. I chose her over you, over our family, over our boys' safety. I don't deserve forgiveness. He was right. He didn't. He moved to California, sends checks, video calls with DeLelfi twice a week, but we both know he's running from ghosts that will follow him forever. 6 months later, DeLelfi and I stood in our new apartment in Seattle, 10 minutes from my parents. It was smaller than our house in Columbus, but free of memories that haunted every corner. We brought only what mattered: photos of the boys, DeLelfi's books and journals, and 2 teddy bears that still smelled faintly of Finnegan and Beckham. DeLelfi was in therapy, working through the weight of being the truth teller, the child who exposed a monster when adults failed. Dr. Chen told me she may have saved not just future victims, but possibly me. Children who document abuse often do so because they sense danger long before adults are ready to acknowledge it, she said. One evening, as we ate dinner at our small kitchen table, DeLelfi looked up at me. Mom, do you think Finn and Beck know I tried to protect them? I think they know you did protect them, I said, pulling her close. You got them justice. You made sure the truth came out. She hesitated. But I should have told you about the bottles sooner. I held her tightly. Listen to me. You were 7 years old. It was never your job to protect your brothers. That was our job, and we failed. You did more than anyone could ever expect. You are the bravest person I know. We sat there quietly, two survivors of something that never should have happened. Outside, Seattle rain tapped against the windows, washing the world clean. A year later, I began speaking at conferences about family violence and coercive control. I tell parents to listen to their children, truly listen. I talk about red flags, about partners who won't defend you, in-laws who undermine your parenting, and anyone who suggests drugging children to make them easier to manage. I tell them about my boys who would be toddling around now, learning words and giving sticky kisses, if any of us had been braver sooner. But mostly, I tell them about Del Elfie, the 7-year-old who watched, documented, and waited for the right moment to speak, who understood that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. The last time we visited the boys' graves, Del Elfie left a note she had written herself. Dear Finn and Beck, I'm in 4th grade now. I still write everything down. Important things people should remember, like how you smiled in your sleep and how you smelled like milk and baby powder. Grandma Beatrix can't hurt anyone anymore. I made sure. Love, your big sister who sees everything. That is the legacy my sons left behind, not just as victims, but as the reason their sister's voice was finally heard. They didn't die in vain. They didn't die in vain. They died because evil wore a grandmother's mask, and no one thought to look beneath it. No one except a 7-year-old girl who understood that sometimes adults refuse to see what is right in front of them. I tell people that all the time now. I tell them that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like generous donors, doting grandparents, respected family matriarchs. Sometimes they speak in the language of concern and faith and help, while quietly tightening their grip behind closed doors. If this story resonates with you, if you have ever been silenced by family dynamics, dismissed when you tried to speak up, or told you were overreacting, please share this video. Your share might reach someone who needs to hear that their instincts are valid, that documentation matters, that children see truths adults deny. Comment below if you've experienced family members who enabled toxic behavior, or if you've ever had to stand up to someone everyone else protected. Your stories matter, and they deserve to be heard. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. We share real stories that expose uncomfortable truths, stories that can save lives by revealing the warning signs others missed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next story, because every view, every share, every comment helps reach someone who needs to know they're not alone. Thank you for listening to Finnegan and Beckham's story. Thank you for honoring their memory. And thank you for being the kind of person who refuses to stay silent when the truth needs to be spoken.